The story begins at a theater where a crowd of audience were watching a film. In another room, there is a projectionist named Paul who is wearing a headlamp so he can navigate in the darkness. With a strong passion for books, Paul is always engrossed in his reading, even during his work. He's currently engrossed in a book titled The Lost Colony, where an entire island populace mysteriously disappears. After a while, as Paul gets up to resume his work, the power abruptly goes out, enveloping the entire theater in darkness. Relying on his headlamp, Paul makes his way to the theater's lobby, but what he sees there leaves him immutably bewildered. The place that was crowded with noisy people a moment ago is now completely empty, with only their clothes left behind. Paul hurries outside the theater and encounters a security guard who is equally surprised as Paul. Now both of them start searching for people everywhere, and amidst this search, the guard's gaze falls upon a human silhouette and he starts approaching it. However, the guard's torchlight suddenly flickers, and the next second he too vanishes, leaving only his clothes behind on the ground. In another part of the city, a nurse named Mary in a hospital was also bewildered by the sudden disappearance of people. Darkness prevails everywhere, and apart from her, there is no one around holding a torch. Mary enters an operation theater where she sees a patient lying on the bed with his chest open, because the doctors who were performing the surgery also disappeared midway. Suddenly, the lights in the operating room flicker too, and the patient vanishes from there as well. The next morning, we see a reporter named Luke. As he opens his eyes, he realizes that his girlfriend hasn't returned home yet. He snuffs out the candles placed on the table and begins to get ready for the office. Luke notices that his phone is out of battery, and there's no electricity at home either. When he steps outside the building, he is completely stunned by the view of the city. The entire city is completely empty, with clothes strewn all over the road and cars halted in the middle. While he's trying to process all this, suddenly a plane crashes behind him. He's at a loss for what to do, so he rushes towards the office. However, there too, the situation is the same. He stares at his girlfriend's photo for a while, then sets it down on the table and leaves. It's at this moment that we notice a strange shadow engulfing the photo. 3 days later, and the entire city is engulfed in darkness. By now, Luke has understood that if he wants to survive, he needs to stay in the light. So, he carries a flashlight everywhere he goes and picks up extra batteries whenever he can find them. As he is trying to start a car that has been abandoned on the side of the road, a man runs up to his window. He begs Luke to open the door because his lighter has run out of fuel. However, Luke doesn't want to risk any danger, so he refrains from opening the door, resulting in the man being swallowed by the shadow. As Luke carries on his journey, he stumbles upon a car with its headlights still on. Despite his attempts, he struggles to get the car's engine running. After a while, as he walks further, he comes across a bar lit up with lights and music playing inside. He feels a sense of relief, assuming that someone must be present. But upon entering, the bar stands completely empty. He enjoys a few drinks there before descending downstairs via the staircase. While exploring the area, a boy named James suddenly emerges from behind, pointing a gun at Luke. James instructs Luke to drop his gun and brings him upstairs. As an unknown man, Luke initially makes James a bit wary, but after a while, both gentlemen get an understanding, and James moves his gun away. Then James reveals that his mother used to work here as a bartender, and after people disappeared, only he and his mother were left alive. His mother has gone to seek help in a nearby church, and James has been waiting for her ever since. Luke asks James to come with him since there's not much fuel left in the generator, but James refuses because he still believes that his mother is alive and will return from the church. Luke explains that everyone has vanished and the city is completely deserted, despite it being 11 in the morning. The outside world remains cloaked in pitch darkness because the sun rises late and sets early. Luke emphasizes the necessity of continuing onward to ensure their survival. However, even after this, James remains steadfast in not joining Luke. So Luke decides to proceed alone. Just as he's about to leave, Nurse Mary, looking anxious, arrives at the bar. She's been desperately searching for her 9-month-old baby and is extremely distraught. She points a gun at Luke and James, demanding her child back. After firing a gunshot onto the table, she regains her composure and collapses to the ground. Meanwhile, on the other side, we see projectionist Paul, who stumbles and falls while running, injuring himself. When he regains consciousness, he is still shielded from the shadow, as his torch is still burning. Despite his injuries, he manages to reach a solar-powered bus stop and settles down there. In the bar, Luke comforts Mary with a glass of water. Mary then proceeds to share her story. She reveals that she has a habit of smoking cigarettes, and when she stepped outside the hospital to smoke and let her lighter, Suddenly, the city's electricity went out. She heard the crashing of cars, and then suddenly, everything fell deep silent. Fortunately, she escaped being vanished due to her lighter. Somehow, when the night passed and she reached her home, in the morning, she discovered that her baby was missing from the crib. And ever since, she has been searching for her baby. In the present, Mary shows her collection of lights that helped her survive, and she hangs one of them around James's neck. Just then, they hear a man's cries from a short distance away. At first, Lucas is hesitant to take any risks, but with Mary's urging, he decides to rescue the man and heads to the source of the sound. When Luke reaches the bus stop, he finds the injured Paul there. With great effort, Luke manages to rescue Paul by bringing him back to the bar. In the bar, Paul begins to share a story. Even after everyone disappeared, he managed to survive with the help of his headlamp. However, after a while, the light began to flicker, and someone forcefully struck his head. It was as if the shadow took control of him, pushing him towards death. Paul's ears were filled with strange sounds, and he screamed for help as he ran along the road. Unfortunately, he slipped, fell, and lost consciousness. When he woke up, his flashlight was still burning, and he managed to make his way to the bus stop where Luke just rescued him. Mary asks Paul who struck him on the head, to which Paul explains that it wasn't a physical entity but merely a shadow. Mary begins to mutter to God, as giving punishment to humanity for their sin. But Luke asserts that there is no God, and they don't deserve punishment. Suddenly, the lights start flickering again, and they all find themselves back in the basement. Luke and Paul join forces to try to fix the generator, and it's then that Paul starts telling them about a book called The Lost Colony. According to the book, in 1587, people on Roanoke Island started disappearing mysteriously. The rest of the world learned of this event when two fishermen arrived on the island and found houses, food, and clothes of humans, but no inhabitants. The fishermen also saw the word Croton carved into a tree, but the meaning of the word remains a mystery to this day. A little while later, Paul starts feeling weak again due to his injury, and Luke and Mary help him lie down on a table. Suddenly, Luke recalls his last day at the office when he saw news on TV where a man from Chicago urging everyone to hold a light in their hands constantly. According to his understanding, these shadows can create hallucinations and manipulate a person into facing death. Therefore, they shouldn't trust anything other than the light they hold in their hands. In the present, Luke comes across an idea. If he can somehow reach Chicago, he might be able to meet the remaining survivors there and find a solution to this predicament. He recalls seeing a truck on the road with a functioning battery, and if he manages to bring the truck here and connect its battery to the generator, it could be able to start the engine as well. Mary finds this idea futile as she believes their fate lies in God's hands, but Luke persuades her nonetheless. James is given the job of taking care of Paul, while Luke and Mary head outside to bring the car to the bar. All of a sudden, James is gripped by hallucinations within the bar as memories of the past flood his mind. However, when Paul asks James for water, his hallucinations subside as James heads to another room to fetch water from the basin. The lights start flickering again. Meanwhile, on the other side, Luke and Mary catch sight of a young girl holding a torch near a car. However, as Luke approaches her, she starts running away. Luke chases after her but slips, losing the torch, and is on the brink of being engulfed by shadows. Just in the nick of time, Mary triggers the car's headlights, rescuing him from the encroaching darkness. On the flip side, as Paul calls out for James and receives no response, he makes his way to the basin. However, all he discovers there are James's clothes strewn on the floor. Suddenly, a noise emanates from the basement, catching his attention. Descending the stairs, he stumbles upon a secret door that opens into a tunnel. With curiosity piqued, he enters the tunnel, and after walking for a while, he reaches its end. Suddenly, the lights within the tunnel begin to fade, and shadows gradually envelop him. Just then, Paul wakes up, realizing it was merely a dream induced by the looming shadows. However, the lights flicker once more, and this time, the shadows truly engulf Paul. When James returns with water from the next room, all he finds on the table are Paul's clothes. Meanwhile, Luke and Mary's flashlights are rapidly draining their batteries, despite having just replaced them. They decide to head to a nearby hospital, where they light a cloth using matches for illumination. However, in that very moment, Mary catches the sound of a baby crying from outside and spots a cradle placed on the road, which is nothing more than a hallucination created by the evil shadows. Despite Luke's attempts to stop her, Mary rushes towards the cradle. When she reaches it, she finds it empty, and that's when the shadows make her disappear as well. Luke somehow manages to pull the truck and reach the bar alone, connecting it to the generator. He successfully starts the engine and sets off with James. However, in his haste, he forgot to close the car's hood, prompting him to stop the car in front of a church to fix the hood. It's there that James also starts hallucinating, hearing his mom's voice coming from the church. Despite Luke's attempts to stop him, he runs inside the church to search for his mom. Luke then sets off in the car, but after driving for a minute, the road ends with a wall in front of him, with Croto written on it. In the church, numerous candles are lit, but their flames are gradually fading. Just as the shadows were about to engulf James, Luke arrives just in time, crashing his truck into the church. The headlights of the truck serve as a lifeline, rescuing James from the encroaching darkness. However, James is still not ready to go with Luke, as he hears his mother's voice echoing from the church, which is nothing but an illusion. Just as Luke starts to follow James on foot, the car's headlights suddenly go off, and in an instant, Luke vanishes. James spends the entire night in the company of the candles, and as morning arrives, he encounters the same young girl whom Luke and Mary had encountered. The girl introduces herself as Brianna and unveils her solar torch, which has kept her alive. Together, they exit the church premises and see a horse waiting outside. They hop onto the horse, looking for a safe place to take shelter. As the sun sets, we see the shadows of Luke, Mary, and Paul following them. And with this scene, the movie comes to an end. Like and subscribe to watch more videos like this. And don't forget to turn on your notification. That really helps my channel. Thanks for watching.